Hello, and welcome back to episode number 15 of the Revere End Podcast. Today, I'm once again joined by my co-host, Billy Dunform. Billy, how are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad. A bit bunged up, but to try something a little bit different today.
Well, yeah, we are going to try something a little bit different. Now, for those who are listening as, I guess, audio only on Spotify, you won't really notice much change at all, but we are recording it on video as well, on the view that's going to go on YouTube as well, in case you wanted to view it on there. Now, without further ado, let's kind of get into the topics of today's podcast. It's mainly going to be around Norwich's first competitive fixture, which saw us lose 3-1 to Luton Town in the Carvalho Cup. Now, Billy, let's just get straight into it. Let's talk about the game. As a match analysis, talk to me. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of discussion around this game, isn't there? Primarily due to, I think I counted up. I think there was 23 first-team players absent, including sort of injuries and the few that maybe Farke sort of omitted himself from the team. But there's been a lot of discussion as to whether like the impact of that and also how pivotal the Carabao Cup was going to be in Norwich City's season. I don't really want to get into that too much because I think it's almost like it's been talked about a lot already. And to be honest, it's not really relevant. Like when we're talking about this game in isolation, we were able to field pretty much a first team squad, maybe Daniel Barden aside. So I don't really see the relevance in talking about that too much. So I just want to sort of get that out of the way. But yeah, it wasn't great in terms of the actual 90 minutes that we watched. And it was a strong case of deja vu for me. It didn't really look like anything we haven't seen before, unfortunately.
Would you? I guess we've got to start off with what you've mentioned about the fact that we had like 23 players missing, which to still field a team which would probably like comfortably, in my opinion, potentially finish like mid-table in the championship, with 23 players missing, and because of the fact that you've got those 23 or 17 or whatever were called up to international duty, your best 15 technically, because they're internationals, missing, to even get in a position where you're close in a game like that. Like, can you kind of cut a little bit of sympathy and go, well, we were never meant to win that game, really, I'm assuming. I mean, how do you kind of see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask me if we had the same dilemma in October or late October, early November, then I don't think we'd be in as strong a position because players will be sold, whether that is sort of Deadwood and in Dermot, Leitner and Tribal's case, or as we'll get onto later on in the podcast, sort of star assets in Jamal Lewis. So I think it's probably made us maybe look a little bit not better, but like our squad depth better than it should have, because basically we're in a really strong position where we've recruited first before we've sold. So, in terms of how I sort of predicted this game would go, I was confident because we have to be considered favourites or sort of there or thereabouts in terms of competing in this league. And obviously, I know it was a cup game, but Luton are in the same league as us. So I sort of felt that we had to win. I think I said 2-1 sort of to you. And I was disappointed, maybe not necessarily at the performance, because I mean, we'll talk more about statistically and analytically in terms of how the game panned out. It was more that sort of the same things were happening. Okay, we had 23 players, first team players missing, and we also had Tim Closer yet again get injured. So it didn't really help things, and there were a lot of kids playing, which we'll get onto. But I was frustrated at maybe aspects that were repeating themselves that we would have hoped would have been sort of eradicated during the off season, really.
Well, I guess if you look at it statistically, like you said, and like just if you go off the basic stuff, which you can kind of, without going into too much detail, like your possession stats, your shots on target. Now, again, like with how I guess we typically play, you've got to look at the fact that Norwich had more possession, which I guess is a given in the way that we kind of structurally set up and the way that we've always played under Daniel Farke. We've always kind of looked to dominate. We were 56-44 against Luton. So again, regardless of the players on the pitch, there's still that certain aspect of we're still playing the same way, shots wise. half of them were on target, which actually statistically is probably better than what we actually normally did in the championship. Now, one thing which I know we spoke about before, which I guess I don't know if you want to talk about here, which quite impressed us, was the amount of shots that we've got off compared to sometimes some other games, and particularly where those shots were coming from as well. I believe it was 8 shots from the midfield alone. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just sort of getting. I've got an article going out on Wednesday, hopefully, about sort of what was different from the Luton game and sort of a bit more of a write up in terms of the tactical things, and that was something that I'd noticed. I've just got it here. So apparently, it says that we had 12 shots against Luton, and 6 of them were on target. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but that's what it says. And yeah, like there did seem to be more of a the increase in the amount of shots that were going on target was a positive. So Norwich did seem happy to pull the trigger and pop off shots, especially the midfield. So Lucas Rupp and Alex Tate, we saw that a few times, and obviously for Kieran Dow's goal, that was a really big aspect, which I noted that we quite simply just wouldn't have seen last season. So that was sort of one thing, I suppose, that was different in that regard.
Now, it's worth knowing as well that every single shot that Luton had on target went in. Now, obviously, I know one of them is a penalty still, but again, without looking individually too much, because I always found that, especially watching it on iFollow, there's only one camera angle, one perception of the game that you get. So I guess we couldn't really see it from any other angles, but you can't really blame someone like Barden for a penalty. Obviously, you can blame Vrancic for the way it was given, in the way that it was just a pretty reckless and silly tackle, considering there's only like 10 minutes left of the game anyway. But for I believe the second goal, I still can't tell if it was through a crowd of bodies and he couldn't see it, or it was a case of it was just a slow piece of reacting and it kind of found its way in the bottom corner. Did you, I mean, from like a standpoint about Barden, now I guess we can both agree that the way he distributed the ball I thought was fantastic. I thought it kind of showed that he'd been recruited for our kind of younger development squads, because he was almost like the built goalkeeper that we'd wanted. And I definitely feel like I'd be more comfortable with him in goal than McGovern just after that short amount of time in goal, just because of the fact that he's so good with his feet and he's a really tall lad as well. So he seemed to be pretty good at catching the balls from whether it be corners or crosses into the box. But do you feel like he could have maybe done a little bit better with either the second or third goal at all?
Well, first and foremost, I think what was really paramount to me, or really sort of like I realised, was we had I think 4 teenagers starting, and it was actually in my opinion, that let us down. And Daniel Barden was playing for Bury, not the Bury you probably know, the Bury that are the same level as DM Town. So like, let's not expect too much of this kid. It's not an ideal situation for any young player to come straight in a scenario like this, let alone be a goalkeeper. You know, you don't ever really want a teenager to be in goal, especially at this level, unless you're talking about somebody of a real high quality. In terms of what I completely agree with the McGovern point. It's no secret, it's no secret that sort of like me and you really just don't rate him, and there's nothing against the lad. And that doesn't necessarily mean we don't want him in the club, because we can see the value in having him around. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, but at the same time, I think Barden has probably made a case for going up to maybe the second spot, especially because I believe he has the homegrown quota, which helps him, which is going to be beneficial for Norwich. I think it is a good point that all 3 shots Luton had on target went in. Now, I'm not going to blame Barden, because that would be ludicrous, but Michael Bailey, I think, made a really good point that maybe if you had a more experienced goalkeeper, one of those might have been saved, and you just don't know how that affects the game. So I think that was a good point. But I completely agree in terms of his technical ability. He was far better than McGovern. Obviously, it goes without saying that you'd rather Krul, but I don't know. Like, do you think this is an area? It appears Norwich have done all their transfer site, or certainly incomings. Do you think this is an area Norwich need to recruit in, or are we okay in that department? Because you've got to think of the worst case scenario if Tim Krul gets injured. I wouldn't be too disappointed with Barden in goal. It might be interesting to see in terms of if he does get that place on the bench. But do you think this is an area we need to recruit in, or?
I think short term, yes. Long term, no. And I guess what I mean by that is, obviously short term, we've just had a ACL injury to Aston Oxborough, who everyone would kind of say is our, well, third choice keeper for quite a long time now. And obviously that's going to be a really heavy injury for him to carry. That could be a, 6 to 9 months job before he's really back and going again. So you've got him, obviously. You've got Archie Meyer, who I've heard really good things about, coming from Aberdeen a couple of seasons ago. If he, he's a call away from being recalled. And I think, in all honesty, he'd probably go ahead of Lewis Barden because he was the under-23s goalkeeper last year. Daniel Barden. And I think that, for me, would suggest that short term, if, Crawls get injured tomorrow, I'd think, all right, we are really up against the wall. We've got, Barden, who has played one game in a professional essence. He's played at the same level as someone that you go down the kind of, go down the road and see effectively. And I just think McGovern, yes, he has experience at the club and, he's international, and I'm sure he'd be, he'd probably put the defence at ease a little bit more, because I think that's the one thing you've got to remember, is that we always praise Tim Krul for how our young defence respond to him. And I think if you put a young defence with an even younger goalie behind him, I just don't think that really works very well. No. So I would probably say, expecting that it would be, if there was injury in the next 6 months, I would probably say, yes, I'd really have an issue that we don't have what I'd class as a suitable backup. But in a year's time, we're probably going to have too many goalkeepers there. And then you're like, well, actually, we've got Aston, we've got Barden, we've got Archie Meyer, and now McGovern, and now someone else. Yeah. And then you've got like 5 goalkeepers at the club before you know it.
No, I completely agree. And I think, like the younger goalkeepers you talk about in Archie Meyer and Aston Oxborough, they're probably like a year or two away from really being anywhere near the first team on a competitive basis. So I'd like to see one of those two sort of eventually progress, but maybe in the short term, it might just be something Norwich might look at. I don't know.
In terms of the game itself, then, what did you make of, or should I say, what did you make of the 2 fullbacks? Because I know that when we were watching it, we had a different opinion on Sam McCallum. And I was interested to just kind of get your opinion on that and see if that's maybe changed a little bit. We were both in agreement at the time that I thought Ballymunba played fantastic. He was up and down the flank. You wouldn't know if that was Max Aarons or not Max Aarons, to be honest with you. And I kind of said it on Norwich Talk podcast that I was on yesterday with Ben Ambrose and Stuart Hodge. And we kind of come to agreement that we didn't know what capacity Ballymunba was going to be here this year. We thought he was probably going to be in the development squad. We kind of spoke about this before, like, is he an under-18s, under-23s, or a first team? But after seeing him play, he looks like a fantastic backup. And with the thought that Sam Byram's going to be probably out, just knowing Sam Byram, unfortunately, for probably the whole season or the majority of it, he's got to be the backup to Max Aarons, surely.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Ballymunba was excellent. I think you mentioned sort of like my criticism of McCallum. Maybe that was probably the Stella Artois talking, to be honest. But I think the reason for that was if you said Norwich got two wing backs, both are very young. One we've just spent £3 million on, and he's coming off the back of a season, a promotion winning season with Coventry League One, and the other one was shafted out on loan to sort of 8th or 9th tier South Shields, and you picked him up for a couple of $100,000. If you said, like, which one do you think is which, I would have said Ballymunba is the one coming off the back of a really good season. And that was the thing for me. Like, no disrespect to McCallum. I thought he was fine. Like, I didn't really have any major criticisms of him. I think when maybe it was just sort of exacerbated in terms of Ballymunba's performance was so good, which maybe made McCallum didn't stand out to me, which is interesting because obviously that is the position we expect the first sort of major sale to be done. I mean, just a quick thing on Ballymunba. I think it's really interesting that there was obviously this debate of like where is his best position, not really in terms of coming to Norwich, but more holistically in terms of his career. And it just makes so much sense to me that he's a wing back. Like he's like Max Aarons in the sense that he is very small, which is never going to benefit you if you're playing in the centre of midfield. Like that's never going to really bode too well. But I've just got his stats up here. He had made 4 tackles, 5 interceptions. He drew 3 fouls and got off 2 shots and 3 crosses. So, like, this is a very productive wing back that we're talking about here. And this is someone that was impact the game in a positive sense. from that wide position. And Norwich utilise their wing backs a lot. I do think Norwich have a bit more of an attacking emphasis down that right-hand side. On the left, they usually play like a more natural wide player in O'Neill or Placato maybe, or in this case, Josh Martin. So I think that maybe Sam McCallum didn't have that same space to drive in potentially. But I thought Barleyman was excellent.
I was definitely going to raise the same point about the Sam McCallum, because when the game was going on, every attack was going down the right-hand side and every defense was almost coming down their right-hand side. So it felt like there was this kind of thing where, because I guess, and I don't know if this is the way we set up, but typically when you look at it, you kind of would say that Max Aarons is, I guess, a bit more of a complete fullback in the way that he can kind of both offensively impact the game as well as defensively. But then you'd probably say Jamal Lewis is better defensively, but doesn't have that same impact going forward. And, you can tell that in the game, because usually it's more a case of Max Aarons goes up and Jamal Lewis will only go up if needed. And it did feel a little bit like that again with Sam McCallum. And I'd really be intrigued to kind of see, with the roles reversed, how that would play with maybe the pressure on Ballymumba and, McCallum being allowed to kind of go forward a little bit. What I'd definitely say is and it's interesting because you can see it even at the top end with players like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Aitley Mains-Niles, that these, I guess, converted wing backs that used to play in centre mid, they all are so comfortable on the ball. And I thought that really showed with Ballymumba, because there could be a couple of men coming at him and he would either, knock it inside, knock it back, knock it down the line. He always knew where the ball was going. I think he even drew a couple of fouls just where he was just flicked it around the defender. And it was just nice to see, because the lad's 18 years old. Like he's younger than me, and he's playing in his first competitive game for us against a very good opposition. And Luton are under Nathan Jones. They're a very good side and very well coached. Yeah, and I think a lot of people kind of saw it as an easy kind of walkover, if you like. And I think it was
in Norwich's fans' minds, the Luton is still the non-league club that we got put out of the cup a few years ago. So don't be fooled by this Luton side. Like, they are a very good outfit. Like under Nathan Jones, they stormed League One, and last season was it was all over the shop for them. And Nathan Jones ended up coming back in during lockdown. So I'd expect Luton to be in like a mid-table championship side comfortably. And in all honesty, like, they've got James Collins up front, and everyone knows how the championship works. If you've got a centre forward who scores goals, you'll be towards the top end of the league. And do I expect James Collins, to get a hat trick every week? No, like, it probably did help that we had a teenager in goal, but they're a good side. Don't underestimate Luton at all.
The one area of the pitch I want to talk about next is the two holding midfielders. I guess like the 6 and the 8, or however you call it. And there's a little bit of, not worry, but I guess interest as well that I have, because there was obviously, in the players missing, you've got our new kind of signing in Jakob Lungi Sorensen, who is a 6, I guess, but then in his interview said he was normally an 8 by trade, converted into a 6. You've also then got Ollie Skip, who can kind of play that same role. You've then also got Lucas Roop, who I guess fits under that category. I still don't know if he's a right back, right wing, CDM. I don't really know. He just kind of fits in. And then obviously you've got Alex Tete and McLean. So it's a very populated position. What did you feel like there was anything wrong with the way that either Rupp or Tete played? I want to ask you first before I kind of give my opinion on it. But how did you feel like they played in that game?
I just thought it was a bit dull, to be honest. Like with all due respect, like, how many times have we seen that combination in the Premier League? And I just wanted to see something fresh. And we do expect Skip or Sorensen to be in front of Tete in the sort of number 6 pecking order, if you like. Tete, I don't have too many qualms with. Like, if he's utilised in the right way, like, I think he can be a benefit to Norwich in terms of limiting his minutes on the pitch. Like, in all honesty, because I don't see Tete suiting the way we play in the Championship. Like, we want to dominate the ball, and I talk about this in the article going up on My Foot We're Right, and how actually Skip and Sorensen, who have a bit more sort of competency in their passing and their technical attributes, actually the space that they find, they could really utilise that. Like, Luton weren't pressing our defensive line at all, and it allowed Tete and Closer and Rupp to an extent, and Zimmerman obviously. They weren't under any pressure. So in terms of how did these guys fare under sort of like a pressing style opposition, we can't really judge it. I thought Lucas Rupp was all right. Like, I thought it was an improvement on his Premier League performances. I am worried about going into a season with Lucas Rupp, Kenny McLean, and Mario Vrancic as our number 8 options, because
Yeah.
I just don't think any of them are good enough. Like Kenny McLean's fine. Like Kenny McLean can do a job, and Kenny McLean has the trust of Daniel Farker, so he will start. But how is Kenny McLean going to like positively impact matches? And I know that's probably a little bit harsh because like he didn't play, so like, you probably think why are we talking about Kenny McLean? But just a more general point about that position, like. Do people really want Lucas Rupp going into the whole playing sort of all 46 games in that number 8 role? It's a little. I'm a bit frustrated that we haven't got somebody. You know, think how excited we were when like a Moritz Leitner came into the side, and like I'm not saying I want Moritz Leitner. That is, I'm definitely not. I want that guy who's going to pick up the ball and be creative from a deeper position. I don't know what you think.
I think we've almost had a couple of like, I'd almost put Tom Tribal under that kind of like could play a 6, could play a 8 role because he can distribute the ball. I'd say Kenny McLean, I still don't know if he'd prefer to be a bit more defensive or offensive. I think he's better creatively than he is defensively. But like you say, he's kind of got the backing of Farker in the way that he'll start kind of every week regardless. And to be fair, in the season we went up, I think his first game for us was the Bristol City game, which I know he still scored 2 goals and was a great debut, but like he didn't really play that much when you think about it. And there's a lot of pressure on him being the kind of man to kind of play that midfield role with either Skip or Jakob Lungi Sorensen. That's what I'm anticipating. And there's a lot of pressure there for him to kind of develop as well and be able to kind of stake his place in that role because it is the most overpopulated position by far on the pitch. And even when you take out Tom Tribal and Moritz Leitner, you've still got, like, say, 4 or 5 different options that you can kind of go for there. I definitely agree with the fact that I think Tete is on borrowed time in this division. I think if we were in the Premier League, I probably wouldn't be as fussed because I think, like I say, you get a bit more time on the ball, which suits him. I think against a team, like I say, which adopts a bit more of a kind of pressing, like gegenpress style, which we will no doubt face this season. I just think Tete is just lost, and I think the fact that in that game as well, he shifted to centre half just showed me even more so how his just legs are gone, and I think it's a case of I'd like him to get as little minutes as possible, but still be obviously involved in the squad because I think he has a tremendous amount of impact on the mood and the morale of the squad and also the youth players coming through as well. In terms of Lucas Rupp, just to touch on him as the last thing, I honestly think that's one of his best outings in a Norwich shirt. I think the only positive I can take from it is that he does look better against a lower quality opposition, which I know sounds really like, oh, of course he would. But it's not always the case because I actually thought that he made a couple of really good runs forward. The problem is with him is he reminds me of Steepleman. He just gets to the point where he doesn't know what he wants to do. Like the ball is there and he's like, do I pass it? Do I run with it? Or do I shoot it? And he's so like, I don't even know the right word for it, but he's just so slow to react sometimes. That's the only thing that really bugs me is because when you're playing that role and you're trying to protect the defense, if you lose the ball, that's 3-4 players potentially running at your back 3, your back 4, or whatever. So I'd like him to be a little bit more composed on the ball, and I just don't think we get that with him right now. But I mean, what do you think about that? If you've got anything to kind of add to that?
No, I completely agree. Like he is quite indecisive, isn't he, in terms of when he gets into that attacking third. I think there was a moment in the game where he hesitated to shoot, and the opportunity sort of went, and then like the next opportunity, like he just levered it. Like he probably wasn't the best opportunity to release a shot. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was just thinking a moment ago in terms of like Leeds and Brentford last season when we were in the Premier League, like how pivotal their sort of central midfielders were, like Matthias Klick and like Matthias Jensen, I think it is as well, isn't it? Like they are the type of midfielders that really like dictate the tempo of how you play, and I think that's maybe what I just want a bit more in that role. Like I want someone like Moritz Leitner, like at his like best, like if that makes sense. I don't want Moritz Leitner. I'm just going to reiterate
almost like
that again. But
a Johnny Howson-esque kind of player.
Well, I mean, there's only one of a kind in that. I think of Johnny Howson,
almost like a Rolls-Royce midfielder, like a Bradley Johnson, even for example. Is that what you kind of say?
Yeah, just somebody who can do it all to a really good, and that's like quite a hard thing to ask for, I suppose. I mean, it will be interesting when Skip and Sorensen play because I think that pressure of being the sole creative midfielder in that 2-2 pivot, like that, it'll be taken off their shoulders because Skipper Sorensen will be able to do that as well. It won't be like Alex Tete just playing a 5-yard pass and being like, play because I can't. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works. But yeah, I think I'm sure we'll be fine. But that's probably the one area when I'm like, actually, like, we've got the numbers, but have we got the quality for a sort of full season in the Championship?
What I wanted to ask you again, and like, without taking too much of this game, because we talked about, in isolation, it's really not that much of an important game. But looking at the individual performances, I'd like to highlight a couple of players to you and just get your thoughts on how you see them faring this season based off how you've seen them play. Not only just to, the other day, but the kind of closing weeks of the Premier League and pre-season itself. So, of course, we've already spoken about Alex Tete, so I kind of won't go over him again. But I'd like to get your kind of thoughts on Tim Closer, or well, what's left of Tim Closer after his kind of injury again, his kind of yearly pre-season injury. To a degree, Christoph Zimmerman as well. And also mainly Marco Stiepermann. And then lastly, Mario Vrancic. I don't want to forget about him. So, like, talk to me a little bit, because obviously I've got some opinions on it, but I want to hear what you have to say about just some of those players, how you feel like they played, and are you worried that they're still there? Do you see them playing much of a part? Let me know what you think about that.
Yeah, I don't want to see Tim Closer or Marco Stiepermann in the Norwich City starting 11 again this season. Like, I think Stiepermann probably has more fans than Closer in a way because of like his performances last season, the season before, sorry. But like, you're just doing that off sort of like past like awards or like what's the thing I'm trying to say? Like Marco Stiepermann hasn't performed in the Norwich City shirt for over a year now, and the thing is, when Marco Stiepermann excelled in that sort of promotion-winning season, he was an unknown quantity. It was this idea of like the element of surprise, almost like nobody knew how to defend against him, because all of a sudden this German lanky wing back that was playing left back, all of a sudden is in the number 10 role and it's like tearing it up, and it's like no one can get close to him because he was stronger in his heavy. He had a bit of a heavy touch, but like he could compensate because like he did use his physicality to his advantage. And then when he went up to the Premier League, that just got sort of exploited because like you just got close to him and he was awful, and like his shooting success rate must have been abysmal because he just like, I look at that. We'll talk about Kieran Dowell in a minute, but a prime example is that Kieran Dowell goal. It comes to him first time and he just smashes at it with his right foot, his weaker foot, and it goes in. We didn't see that once from Stiepermann last season or that game. He can't be in this Norwich City side for me. Like, I just don't rate him. And if you do rate him, I get why, because you're clinging on to those memories of like the promotion winning season. But like, what does he offer us? Like, especially with Jordan Hugo up front. All right, yeah, like they're too similar in terms of their skill set, and I just think if Emmy's here, like you play Emmy or Kieran in the 10 for me, and you have a bit more pace up wide. That's what I think.
I'm definitely worried about the fact that Stiepermann looks like, again, he probably will feature quite a lot this season, or at least get the nod over some players which like Kieran Dowell, because we've got such influx of players that can play on the wide kind of left or right wing, which I guess converted number 10s that, I'm anticipating whether it be Todd or Emmy or Kieran Dowell to kind of play that central role with either like O'Neill or Paqueta, and either Emmy or Todd on the other side, if you like. So they'll kind of like go between the three and almost have like a free roam between those. And you saw that a little bit yesterday in the way that kind of Kieran Dowell liked to again cut in, because he's not really an out and out winger at all. So the worry for me is that Stiepermann, I just think, like I highlighted earlier, I just don't think he is there as a player for this level. And I know that might seem harsh because of how he was before, but in the current time setting of how he appears to be playing, whether that be down to confidence or just ability, I don't know. All I'm saying is, because we know he was fantastic the year we went up, and he was contributing on all fronts, whether it be assisting or scoring, but I can't even tell you the last time the man had a shot on target. Like, I remember one point in the game where the ball fell to him from about 8 yards out, just to the right of the goal. And he took a touch and he didn't know what to do. And the touch literally took it to the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper just come and collected it. And, you know, if that's Kieran Dowell or Emi Buendia or Todd Cantwell, they're taking a touch and they're going to hit that and probably score. But at minimum, they're going to make something of that opportunity. And I just feel like when you have such a vast amount of attacking options, which are just naturally more talented, gifted, and better in that position, I just don't think he has a role in that area. I know he's a different dimension, a different option because of his height and his physicality. I agree. But I just don't think creatively he is anywhere close to the options that we have in that position now.
No, I 100% agree. And I think you talked about Kieran Dowell there. Like, it'll be so interesting. Like, I hope that he starts in the 10 against Huddersfield. Yeah. Like, you would expect so. Because even like Emi Buendia hasn't really been given a chance in that position. So it'd be nice to see how like a Dowell Pookie or like a Dowell Eder partnership works. Like, I wouldn't expect Hugo to start because he's been here about a month. Like, and to be honest, like, he didn't really do anything to me that warrants a start, to be honest. But that's probably something we'll talk about later. But yeah, I'd be really interested in seeing Dowell in that role. I just think he oozes quality, doesn't he? Like, yeah, I love Dowell. I do love him.
I guess we can move on to Jordan Hugo, because I again, I want to ask kind of what you had to think about this one, because in my opinion, I felt like he was really unfortunate with the service that he got. I feel like he pretty much was just left stranded apart from the odd ball forward. I think there was a couple of times where Ballymumba got down the right-hand side, and there was one time he put a cross a kind of blades across the face of goal across him for Hugo. But again, it's like a half chance. I just didn't feel like he really got anything. And I feel like it's quite harsh because I don't want to judge him off one game. And I still, like I've said in previous podcasts, I still have high hopes for him, because I think he's going to be a completely different element for us this year. And almost, like you say, play that kind of Jordan Rhodes role. But I mean, what did you think of his performance? Did you think that he could have done anything more? You know, did you think that he kind of, his movement was poor or something? Or do you just think it was the lack of service?
No, I'd agree. Like, there was a lack of service. The thing that I'd say though was like, Jordan Hugill isn't going to thrive on like he's going to thrive in balls in the box, right? Like, he's going to want to use his physicality and his strength to his advantage. And Norwich don't play that way. And under Farker, they've never played that way. Now, unless this is something that we see a transition more to, whilst I don't expect Norwich to turn into sort of Burnley or Mill will have sort of like past seasons, like, I do think Norwich might try utilising the sort of like crosses more frequently. But Norwich have never played that way. Like, Norwich have never, like, philosophically, like, ever like had a system that would utilise a target man. So maybe this is raising a bigger question on the recruitment of Jordan Hugo. For what it's worth, like, I like Hugo. Like, I think he's a very good championship player. Like, and I think he will be of use to us. But I just wonder, like, I don't see us getting the best out of Jordan Hugo. Like, that doesn't mean that Jordan Hugo won't perform well for Norwich, but like, Norwich aren't going to play a system that gets the best out of Jordan Hugo.
I take a lot of confidence in his finishing ability, so that if he was to come on and that a chance was to fall in his way, that he's got that killer instinct in front of goal. Yeah. I think that's the one thing I take confidence in, is that, you know, coming off the back of his best season personally for him with 15 championship goals, which, you know, it's fantastic. I know Tibu Pukki, you know, notched almost double, but that was under extreme circumstances. You know, you don't really usually get a striker come into the league and kind of notch like 29 goals. So for any, you know, if he delivered 15 league goals for us, would be absolutely delighted, you know. So I think the one thing I will say is I feel like he's going to play a bigger role with Plaqueta, or however you pronounce it, when he comes on, because from what I've gathered and what I've seen, he is more of a kind of get down the line, get across into the box kind of player, a lot of pace, can get in behind. And I think that working with Hugo, if those two were to come off the bench, I think that's what will be our plan B next season. You know, maybe away from home, you can try to maybe play on the counter. Someone like Plaqueta and Hugo would work great, because you can get the big man into the box, even with a Steepman there. As much as I've critiqued him, a bit more physicality, you've got that second option. Whereas before, it's kind of been like, all right, well, if they block the pass against the Pookie, and they kind of nullify our two wingers because they usually want to cut inside, we have no other way of getting through a defence. Whereas now
Yeah.
we have a long ball over the top for either one of them to chase or maybe a flick on from Hugo. That's where I can kind of see him playing a part.
No, I agree, and I do think Norwich will be more versatile in their sort of like attacking output. Like, I don't think they'll just be trying to thread balls to Pookie like they have done for the last 2 seasons. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like that Jordan Hugo's not going to, for me, in my opinion, like this might be like famous last words, but I don't think he's going to get 20 goals to Norwich. That's not an issue. Like, I still think he has value to the side, but I guess what I'm saying is like even if Norwich do incorporate more of a direct emphasis in terms of the crosses and utilise Paqueta, like I still don't think they're going to get 100% out of Jordan Hugo like they did Teemu Pukki. But of course, that doesn't mean that Jordan Hugo isn't going to be like a valuable member of the squad.
Well, even if he got like 10 goals, I think it's just taking a little bit of the pressure off Pukki. I think that's the main thing for me is, Pukki has got enough pressure as it is coming into the season with a lot of fans, as we've kind of, I guess, I don't know if you want to speak about it even now, but a lot of fans thinking that we're going to get the same team with Pukki as before. And, he's going to easily just, score another 30 goals for us and, we'll get promoted. I think, there's a bit of disillusion in the way that people think that this is the same team with Pukki, which we initially signed. But even if Pukki, has someone else there to kind of take a little bit of the weight off his shoulders and step in for a couple of games and, play that kind of Jordan Rhodes role, I think that's the main thing for me for Hugo to kind of play his part. And I think from what I've seen from him as well, he looks like a fantastic teammate. I think he's quite a traditional striker in the way that he will, go at the defense, let's just say, and kind of be a bit of a headache for them. But I think early signs there's a lot of potential. It just depends on how we utilize them, which I guess we can kind of get into agreement with.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had anything else to kind of say about that, about Teemu Pukki or anything at all, because I know we've kind of spoke about it a couple of times before.
Well, I mean, I'm not expecting too much from Pukki, in all honesty. Like, I think he'll add value to the side. But I completely agree that he's not going to score 29 goals from open play again, is he? I had a really interesting conversation on Twitter with Ian Gabelli, like fan of the podcast. He shown a lot of support, and he was basically like, we're basically in agreement. Like, I just don't know how it's going to pan out in terms of that number 9 position, because I think all of them have, like, you could foresee like Adam Eder having a breakout season and getting 20, 25 goals, but you could also see him being shipped out on loan to like MK Dons or something. Like, it's quite plausible that all 3 could have like insane seasons and also sort of like mediocre ones. Like, I'm not really too sure how it's going to pan out, and I don't really think there's a standout candidate to sort of start against Huddersfield. I mean, I know we'll get on to sort of our predicted 11 against Huddersfield in a moment, but I don't think anyone during pre-season has really grabbed that shirt. It would have been good to see Eder or Pukki grab a goal last night, or when we were recording last night, in terms of when they were playing against each other. I mean, Pukki had a great chance, and Eder was a little bit isolated. But no, I don't know. I'm not sure on that position, to be honest.
No, I definitely agree. And on a side note, never did I ever think I'd be watching a Finland versus Ireland game before. That was a really weird one for me. In terms of, before we kind of look ahead to Huddersfield and the start of, I guess some would say, the games that do really matter. Who was your man of the match? I want to see if we're like unanimously agreed here, but I had down as my man of the match, and really the only player that really impressed me was Kieran Dow. Barley Mumba was a good shout. I just think because of the way he instinctively took that goal and the way he kind of drove at the defence, I just thought he looked like an absolute class player.
Yeah, I do worry that's probably not going to be the last time we say that on this podcast. Not only like do we expect him to have some good performances, but we are just sort of obsessed with that guy. So Kieran Dow all day for me.
Lovely. Well, I guess let's look ahead to kind of Huddersfield then. Let's have a look at what we kind of think that the team will be. Obviously, we're still going to be without Emi Buendia. Is there any other like notable? Obviously, got like Grant Hanley, Sam Byram, long-term injuries. We know that, but are there any other notable players that we're going to be missing at all as far as I think it's just going to be Emi Buendia, isn't it? Because it's suspended for one more game after Huddersfield as well. It's 3 match ban.
I mean, there is a slight apprehension in terms of how ready the international players will be. Like, there's a lot coming back, and the dynamic at Colony will shift quite considerably. So I do wonder how many of them will be ready to come straight back in. Like, I expect like Ben Godfrey and Max Aarons to come in. Like, they know how this works, but maybe like Ollie Skip and Jakob Sorensen and Placater, like how much are we actually expecting from these guys against Huddersfield?
Well, I guess we can probably unanimously say Tim Krul going to start in goal. There's no
Yeah.
real thought that, Barden's going to come and start against Huddersfield. I think I'm really excited to have Tim Krul back, and hopefully a bit of confidence, getting called up for the first time in like 5 years or something like that for the Dutch squad, which is really good to see. As a back four, I definitely think Aaron's is going to start. Again, Ballymumba, I'm super impressed with him, and if he was to start, I wouldn't go, but I think, Max Aaron's coming back. No doubt he's the best fullback at the club. So I'm happy to have him there. Who do you think is going to be the two kind of partnership in the middle? Can you see Ben Gibson coming in early, or what can you?
No, I can't, and maybe I kind of wish that I could, but unfortunately, like, he just hasn't played enough football in the last 2 years, and it's going to take some time with Ben. I'm intrigued about that dynamic. Like, are we expecting Godfrey to leave now? Like, that's an interesting one, but I think the pairing will be Zimmerman and Ben Godfrey. Personally, I mean, I don't know what you think, but
no, I'd agree. I'm very intrigued to see Godfrey at right centre back and Ben Gibson at left centre back. Two players on their natural side. I'm really excited to see that. We always rave on about needing a left-sided centre back, and I think with a fully fit, Ben Gibson, I'm really intrigued to kind of see how he's been playing. The early signs have been there from his attitude, because that was always like the one thing which I was a little bit, is his attitude going to be there? Because there's some stories from Burnley which really doesn't make him paint him out in the best picture. But I'm really excited if Ben Godfrey does stay and it's not a direct replacement. I'm really kind of interested to see how those two kind of work together. But we're both in agreement. Zimmerman and Ben Godfrey is fine. Left back, can we see? Well, I guess first, will Jamal Lewis even be here? Can we see Jamal Lewis playing, or are we thinking Sam McCallum? Are we thinking Javi Quintilla? There's a lot of good options there.
I don't know if you want to talk about the Jamal Lewis saga now, or maybe we should wait until we've got this starting 11 out of the way. But for me, it's Sam McCallum. Like, Javi Quintilla, I think, is injured or maybe isn't quite, won't be
He's
quite
a risk.
fit. So yeah, so I think it makes sense to play Sam McCallum for me. Yeah, I don't expect Jamal Lewis to be here, but maybe we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment.
Yeah, well, like I said, we'll kind of cover that. But assuming that what we talk about later with Jamal Lewis not being here, I would happily have McCallum in, just because he's got, again, another 90 minutes under his belt. He's played alongside Zimmerman as well the other day, which I guess is just nicer because Quinty has probably not played alongside the same back four. And I just think he's, honestly, from what I've seen so far, probably going to be the preferred number one option and fit our kind of system a little bit better. Going into the two central defensive midfielders this is what I kind of have personally of Ollie Skip and Kenny McLean. Can you see any kind of difference there at all?
No, I completely agree. I think that's the sensible pairing, isn't it? Ollie Skip has to play. We have to give him a chance. Like, we can't go with Alex Tate in midfield again if Ollie Skip's fit. I think he's come here with a high reputation and an expectancy to play, and I think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. If he starts and he doesn't impress, which I think is unlikely, then maybe Sorensen or Tate might come in. But I think you have to start Skip, don't you?
I think as long as Skip or Sorensen is there, I'm content, because I feel like they're the two kind of players that we need next to Kenny McLean to protect the defense a little bit more. I just think I'd love to see Oliver Skip in there, because I just think he's a fantastic player, and I cannot wait to see him in a Norwich shirt playing. And as much as McLean is probably the best we have in that number 8 role, I mean, in the future, what do you think about like Kieran Dow dropping down into number 8, or do you think that he's best suited to number 10? What's your kind of opinion on that?
Yeah, I never really seen Dow, or I haven't really at all in that role. So I'd be reluctant to sort of like fly the flag for him there, because I also really want to see him further forward as well. But yeah, I mean, it's that same issue we talked about earlier, isn't it? Like, there's no standout candidate for me. I think McLean will start because Farker really rates him, but yeah, I'd like to probably see a bit more sort of technical quality in that role.
Moving forward to, I guess, like the front three, assuming we're playing a 4-2-3-1, which I think we can both kind of agree that's the way we normally set up anyway. Playing through the middle, Kieran Dow, I've got both in a, I mean, obviously with Todd Cantwell coming back, you could say, well, he could be playing down the middle, but I've got Kieran Dow as probably our best option in that number 10 role. Out on the left, we obviously saw Josh Martin play there against Luton. We've seen then O'Neill had come on. We've got Plaqueta. We've got Todd, who could play, do a shift there. Who do you think is going to be playing out on the left?
Hopefully it'll be O'Neill if he's fit. I mean, he came on, so you'd have thought that like by the time that this game comes around, he will be ready. Yeah, it's an interesting one because my immediate thought was, okay, if O'Neill's not fit, then play Placatum. But we do also have Todd Cantwell. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting one.
Can I forget about him?
Yeah, like I'm not convinced. It sounds a bit silly, but I'm not really like thinking about Todd. Like, I'm not even really considering him. Like, I'm just presuming he's going to be sold.
I think it's worth knowing that Todd in the bigger games last year was fantastic down that left side.
Yeah.
And the thing for me is the questions are these games going to be big enough for him to turn up to? When you haven't got the Man Uniteds, the Chelseas, the Arsenals coming down to Carrow Road, is away at Huddersfield going to be a game that Todd wants to get himself up for off the back of an England trip, or is he going to be having his mind on different things? I think if we, give him the benefit of the doubt and we assume that he is going to be happy to play and he's committed and he's fit, I would personally think that Cantwell will start on that side. But I would probably prefer away from home, just naturally, just seeing him in pre-season. I'd rather have Hernandez on personally. I just think he's going to be absolutely unbelievable again this season. And I think this is a league which he can just tear up in like you saw last time. In terms of the right-hand side, there's a couple of options. I know that typically you'd see Semi Buendia play down here, but you've got Josh Martin. You've got the potential of Todd Cantwell going over to that side, Well, who do you think is going to be lining up on the right-hand side?
I've gone for Josh Martin. I think he warrants a start, in my opinion. Like, I thought he was really impressive against Luton.
I think I'd love to see Josh Martin play because I think he is one of those players which hasn't got the hype coming through just because of the fact that we've got so many great young players as it is. But he's almost got that kind of like Todd Cantwell-esque kind of feel about him in the way he plays, but just faster. And I really love the fact that he just seems like almost an evolved player to what Todd Cantwell was at that age coming through the academy. I would happily have Josh Martin start. I just think that it will be Hernandez on one side and Todd Cantwell on the other side, personally, just because I know how Daniel Farke picks his teams. But if Josh Martin is there, I'm over the moon because I think the lad is absolutely brilliant. And I'd love to see him there. I guess the really controversial one, because it's like a 33% chance, I guess, when you think about it, which one of the three strikers is going to line up? Who do you have down?
I've gone for Ida. That's probably bias in a way, just in my sort of admiration for him. But
really,
I just want to see it. I do. I want to see him given a chance. I think he's got the most promise. It probably will be Pukki if he's fit, to be honest. But I just don't think Pukki's there mentally at the moment, unfortunately.
I think it's going to be Teemu Pukki because I just think if Teemu Pukki is fit, Daniel Farke almost can't select Adam Ida over him because Pukki is just the superior striker in line of just naturally, you can't kind of pick the younger kind of prospect coming through when you've got Teemu Pukki there. But I would, again, be so happy if Adam Ida started. And to be honest, I wouldn't bat an eyelid if Jordan Hugill started. I think that's the nice thing is that we've got three strikers which, like you say, haven't claimed the position. So, give it to whoever wants it the most. I think with the two boys coming back off international duty, I'm hoping that those two are going to be hopefully in a better mindset, a more positive mindset, getting away from the squad for a little bit, which might help and kind of, getting back to that normality that might, I guess, in some way help. And I think for Adam Ida, he's going to be on cloud 9 right now. I think it's probably the best time for him to come in, but alternatively, if he goes in against Huddersfield and have a stinker, that'll knock him straight back down to level 1 again, and then you've kind of got a question, was it the right time to chuck him in? I don't know. Personally, that argument doesn't really stand with me. I still think he's a footballer at the end of the day. Like they have good games, they have bad games. If he goes in and scores a hat trick, he could go on and have an unbelievable season. But I think Teemu Pukki is probably more likely to kind of stake a claim for that role against Huddersfield. I guess before we talk about Jamal Lewis, I just wanted to get what's your prediction for the Huddersfield game? What do you think score-wise? Obviously, again, it's such a gamble because we just don't know what Norwich we're going to get because we're going to see a completely different team to what faced Luton. But kind of, what do you think is going to happen?
I want to say like a 2-0, 3-0 win, but I do think it'll be a draw. I think it'll be like a 1-0 draw. Sorry to be boring, but
We always start the season off really slow, don't we?
Yeah.
Especially away from home. We usually have an absolute stinker. And I think we're such a deep and quality squad this year that the only way we'll lose is if there's some kind of cohesive issue between the players, almost like a that QPR kind of when they come back down and they had all these players and kind of they just didn't kind of play with one another. But I don't think we're going to have that problem. I think we're going to start well. If it's not a draw and not a 1-1 draw, I think it's going to be a 3-1 win.
Cool.
Yeah.
Tasty.
Well, Huddersfield struggled a lot at the end of the last season, and I know it's a new season, and a lot of clubs fancied themselves against the teams that have come down because, to be honest, they are probably at the most vulnerable when they come back down. They're almost a little bit like, are we going to storm the league? How are we going to kind of flop and finish like a Sunderland? And I think they struggle to find their identity straight away. So, you've seen it in the past before because we're so accustomed to going up and down. Usually we lose our first game of the season when we bounce back. And I mean, the year we went up again under Daniel Farker, I think we had 6 points in 10 games or something ridiculous like that. That might be completely wrong, but we started horrifically. So I'm not too fussed if we start with a loss against Huddersfield. I don't want that to negative. I'm worried that of the impact that's going to have mentally on the players that are already very fragile from last season's campaign. That's all I guess I'll kind of say on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a loss will be detrimental, to be honest. Like, you've seen how the shift from HMS pissed the league to shit, we're actually not that good. It's transitions on Twitter. So I would be worried if we didn't pick up at least a point against Huddersfield.
I guess to kind of end it on, let's just talk about the, I guess, unconfirmed news, but it's been floating around. We've heard, the Archer and EDP, Paddy Davitt, he's commented on it. We've heard Michael Bailey from The Athletic comment on it, and as well as so many other journalists. I believe the person who broke it really last night to say it was kind of confirmed was David Ornstein from The Athletic, who was like the Arsenal kind of correspondent or something like that. But from what I've gathered, it's a 15 million initial fee with 5 million's worth of add-ons, which again, that could be, in national appearances or something.
I think it's about 2 million add-ons. That's what Michael Bailey said.
Well, even then, you're looking at between 17 to 20 million pound for honestly someone that I would be happy to get 15 million for. So I think the fact that we're getting that guaranteed 15 million, that pays and gives us 3 million profit from our reported fees from this year's transfer windows for the 11 players we've brought in, for a player which is, great, don't get me wrong, Jamal Lewis has been fantastic, and I don't want that to kind of shine away that he was an integral part of that team that took us up. I also think he is incredibly, not overrated, but overvalued in some Norwich fans' eyes in the way that I think he's very replaceable. And I think you'll see that with how Sam McCallum blossoms in, and also how Javi Quintilla plays, because I think Jamal Lewis is so good defensively, but offensively, I just think there's a lot of questions to kind of be there.
No, I agree. There was a really good tweet from Canary Cast on Twitter, actually, that was basically saying Norwich Stuart Weber's been able to improve this Norwich side with the sale of Jamal Lewis, in every position, which I think is a really good point. How many teams can you say that have come down from the Premier League and have got a better squad than they did last season? I mean, I'll be expecting Emi Buendia and Max Aarons and Ben Godfrey all to be here. I don't know, I hope they are, but I think that's a really interesting point.
I think going off just our chat in our last podcast with Michael Bailey about the fact that if we start to see players, I think I remember him saying, if you see McCallum go out on loan, you know that Jamal Lewis is not going to get sold. And I think unless you see a right back come in, I'd expect Max Aarons to be fine, because I don't think they're going to chance a long injury to Sam Byram and just Ballybumba as the right back for the season. So I think you've got to be looking for signs. Obviously, you could take it as a sign that we've just signed Ben Gibson as to potentially where Ben Godfrey might end up. I personally just think it was additional depth, and it was a loan deal as well, which was probably presented to us, and we felt like was a good option to take at the time. But obviously, you can kind of put the pieces together yourself. If you see a right back coming the next week, Max Aarons is gone, and I think that's the thing. I would expect
go on.
that if there were any sales to happen, it would be in the next probably 2 weeks. I don't think Norwich would leave it any later than that to get a replacement.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I've been sort of expecting a week where there's almost like a fire sale
Yeah.
of players, and I think this week could be it, or maybe next week could be it. Like I think we're getting close to it. In terms of like Ben Gibson and Ben Godfrey, I don't know. Like I think I got a feeling Ben's staying. Like I think Akinfenwa will go back out on loan, and I think Norwich will go with the 5. Like I think they'll go with Ben Gibson and Ben Godfrey.
Well,
Zimmerman
4
and
if you count
Hanley,
closer.
yeah, that is a worry. That is a worry. Hanley and Closer are very injury prone, and that maybe worries me a little bit. So maybe Femayo will stay around, but I think from what I've read, it doesn't quite seem that Femayo is at that level. But we didn't maybe think Barley Mumble was. So,
well, to be fair, we're kind of not writing off Grant Hanley here, but I would say Grant Hanley was our best centre half last year when he was fully fit. Better than Godfrey
he is,
was,
but like.
so.
But like, how regularly fit is he? Like every season he has injury issues. So,
and that's the thing. We've especially bringing in Ben Gibson. You've got Grant Hanley, Tim Closer, and Ben Gibson. 3, I guess, in the last couple of years, notoriously injury-prone centre halves. It's a big risk because all 3 of them could be out at the same time, and you're like, great, we signed an extra centre half, and we've not really gained from that. But assuming that everyone is there, we're going to have 4 to 5. Probably top of the league kind of quality defenders at our disposal. And I do love the thought of that, because if that means that we can then maybe sell a Ben Godfrey off in January to further improve the squad, as long as we have the depth there, that's kind of like the main thing for me. But unless you had anything to kind of else to kind of highlight, Billy, but I think that's probably a good point to kind of end things off today. Now, obviously, if you are viewing it on Spotify, it'd be lovely if you could download the podcast. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you could rate it a 5 out of 5, presuming that you've enjoyed it, that would be fantastic. In terms of on YouTube, we're very new to this, so if you could like and subscribe, that'd be great. We're going to plan to do this for our kind of podcast going forward, assuming that it's something which people enjoy. So please do feel free to kind of interact with us in the comments as well. But until the next time, we'll see you later.